Hi everyone, and welcome to the third and final crowdfunding webinar that we're doing in partnership with Dorset County Council. My name is Bertie Hurtage and I'll be your coach for today. And we're joined here by our previous project owner, successful project called FM, who ran a crowdfunding project with us called Secret Spitfires. Which managed to raise £6,390 from the crowd. So hello, Ethan.
That was very good indeed. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. If you could tell us a bit about the project, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, well, it's basically the subject was to do with Second World War, where various young women, basically teenage girls, young boys, and a few elderly men and a few engineers were building Spitfire warplanes in secret in various towns and cities. And nobody ever knew this at the time. Germans never knew, so hence they never got bombed. And even to this day, nobody knew the story. And we came across this via a very elderly gentleman here in Salisbury. This is where I live. And Salisbury was one of the major places where these secret Spitfire factories were. He's a 92-year-old gentleman who, in fact, worked at the factories, and he's now a historian. Last meeting, we came across him, and all of a sudden came across this story, and rest is history, really.
Brilliant. Great. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Just for our audience, a quick recap. So this is the third and final webinar. The first webinar, we looked at planning your project. So the specifics of finding your audience and the different groups that live within it. In our second webinar, we looked at creating your project page. So building a nice story, putting that together and making sure that your page is reflective of your project and that you're motivating people to pledge. And today we're going to be looking at running your project and specifically looking at a few channels that you can use to promote it during your campaign. And all of these webinars, if you have missed them, are available on the YouTube channel or the Eventbrite link that you signed up to. So in tandem to the webinars, do download the 3 guides that we've got available. They're absolutely fantastic and they're full of all the advice that you really need to make a success of your project. So do have a look through those. So yes, up until this point, hopefully by now you have done your planning, you've created your project page and you should be ready to go live. And I appreciate this can be a very kind of daunting task to put that live button and get off that initial 0 figure. So Ethan, it would be really great to hear about what you guys did up in the lead to that day and what happened on your launch day.
Well, we thought by using basically social media and building up some sort of a campaign before we press the button for go, would probably just take its own speed and put everything forward because it is such an amazing story anyway. And there are a lot of people interested in Second World War. So what we did was we got a lot of our friends together who put a lot of posts up on Facebook, on Twitter, and we designed quite a lot of little stories that would go on and on a daily basis. And in fact, in the case of Twitter, we were putting up 3-4 little tweets every day, basically. And we ran that for about a week or so, and then pressed the button, and then started praying that something would happen, of course. And in the beginning, of course, with friends and family and whatever else who usually put in a bit of money just to get things going, it started, but then it started to slow down. And then you know the story for the rest of it.
Yeah, brilliant. So you did do a bit of kind of warming up of your crowd before going live. So people were, they weren't new to the fact, that kind of core audience weren't new to the fact that you were planning a crowdfunding.
I think that's crucial. You really have to do a bit of a warming up exercise and start some kind of a hype going, at least with people you know, who are also savvy on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. What we always say, there are kind of a few fundamentals in crowdfunding, and we always advise that you line up kind of at least 10% of your target before you go live. So that way, when you are live, you've got some money, you know where it's going to come from, and you can pledge that directly onto the project. And that means that you can kind of start building a bit of momentum, and that anyone who looks at your project can see that you're raising some money on there, and they feel in turn confident to make a pledge. And within that networking map exercise that we looked at in the first guide, it's very important that you start from the middle and work your way out. So that is your core audience. That's your friends, your family, your neighbors, your colleagues, those people who, as Ethan had said, are warm to the idea already of what you're trying to do. And it's certainly worth giving all of those people a call before you go live to say, this is what we're trying to do. Can you make a pledge and help us once we go live? So as soon as that live day hits, you've got the ball rolling from day one. So it's traditionally in crowdfunding, we tend to see a bit of a peak in activity to begin with. So day one, that's when lots of pledges flood onto the page. And we always see a bit of a lull in the middle, and then another peak at the end of activity. So this actually is from the Secret Spitfire dashboard, which kind of shows the different pledges that came onto your project for the duration that you're alive. And what's really interesting is that you have kind of combated that traditional behavior we tend to see, and you've got lots of activity, pledging activity throughout the whole campaign. So it'll be really good to hear about what you did to keep the momentum going and keep people interested across the entirety.
Well, yeah, it was hard work. I mean, there's something I think a lot of people need to get into reality section, and you really have to work hard at this. It's not something just does it by itself. What we did was we started putting on local events, manual events, like little shows of the film, the little leaflets giving out on certain little cafeterias and whatever else. And also, most importantly, was getting a lot of our friends. And through the start of the campaign, we started getting people who are really very interested in the subject itself, who had grandparents who worked at the factories and stuff themselves, who started putting various posts in the Facebook site, because we kept talking constantly about the little bits of the story that some of our ladies we interviewed were talking about, and that was helping engage other people into thinking, well, my grandmom was just like that, or my granddad was just like that. And a lot of those people then started to offer their help in order to push it. And of course, they too started posting on the Facebook. They started posting on Twitter, and just the sheer fact they were getting engaged with the subject was causing other people to come in on it, and then seeing what we were talking about, and then maybe add something to it or learn something from it, and then pass it on to somebody else. And I think that's how it worked. It was basically manually doing some work, and then of course slowly the local press got involved. But we'll talk about that shortly as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic example of how willing people can be to help. And I think the example that I recommend to project owners to get in touch with people that you know, or reach out personally or as direct as you can to say, this is what we're trying to do and how can you help? And in many instances, people would like to give advice or to offer their assistance. And that's where you get hold of some new and interesting ideas for your project. So with that in mind, what would you say that the kind of main challenges you faced were during that campaign?
Well, it was threefold actually. The most important one, we misjudged this one from the start, was basically our target audience. We just assumed that just going over social media we'll be able to reach tens and thousands of people and maybe do some advertising through Facebook and reach another 10,000 people and whatever else. But what we really didn't think very carefully about was our target audience, due to the subject matter, are basically in their 60s and 70s. Quite a lot of them were. So over the age of 60 anyway. And many of these people do not go onto Facebook or Twitter or carry mobile phones around with them to pick up daily stories and stuff. So we really had to get our heads around how to reach that market, and then perhaps get their nephews and grandsons or daughters and sons involved in helping them fund it. And that we did through radio and local press.
Brilliant. Yeah. So the radio was essentially quite a partner throughout that whole crowdfunding process.
But bless the BBC. I mean, you know, we all take the mickey out of the BBC. We all want to smack the BBC all the time. But you know, they do look after independent producers and independent people, and they picked up on the story. Radio Wiltshire immediately picked up on the story from some of the newspaper articles that was going around, and there was Wiltshire Times as well, who were also very, very fond of this project, and they kept pushing it. And they in fact ran about 3-4 different stories on this. And every single time they wanted to know what was happening, were we getting on, what else could they do? And that in itself brought a lot of people in, who then started going on to Facebook and Twitter and whatever else, and then pledging.
Brilliant, yeah. No, and to that effect, it's all part of your network mapping process. So for Secret Spitfire's process, they were able to see that the stakeholders or the people who would be able to promote their project were the local media. So they made sure that they had a good relationship with them, and they turned out to be a fantastic partner throughout. While radio was extremely effective for your project, we tend to advise all project owners really to concentrate on email and particularly Facebook in terms of the channels that they use to reach out to their crowd, both of which are really, really helpful. And email, because you can be very direct in your approach to someone, and you can come up with a strategy as to how you want to get in touch and tell them about your project. And in an ideal world, that would mean one email would do its job, but you do have to come up with a structure as to what your approach should be, how many times you're sending an email out, and what that message is. But I suppose differently with Facebook, Facebook is, the world is your oyster. It's completely infinite in terms of the number of people that you can reach out to. So make sure that you've got a good page together, and then through that, with a decent social media strategy that you can employ on a week by week basis, you can really reach a very wide and diverse group of people. So in terms of what makes a great post, there are kind of 5 different tips that I'd recommend. First and foremost is, I think, FM, you were brilliant at, is don't always talk about the fact that you're crowdfunding. It does get a bit dreary after a while. And what's great about the crowdfunding experience is that you've got a project that you're trying to promote, and it's all about what's interesting about what you're trying to do. So make sure that that's as clear as possible in your messaging, and try and use a range of different things to make sure that you're not constantly talking about the same thing. And in the same vein, try and use imagery to really inspire people to engage with what you're trying to do. And that way they won't kind of gloss over when they see your post. They'll be able to connect with it and appreciate what you're trying to tell them. There are other mediums available with posts, and I think videos are a fantastic tool for engagement, and using different videos across your campaign, whether it's something formalized and professional or even just a live and very basic version. They're very shareable, and they're a fantastic tool to get people to gain interest in what you're trying to do. But with any of this, sorry?
That's very true. I just wanted to add something on there. You said something very important there, and that is exactly what we did. From the film we had, from some of the interviews, we took tiny little clips, those clips as teasers to get people's interest. So you're very right on that one.
Yeah, and that had some good reactions to it. people.
Definitely, most definitely.
Yeah, because that's the thing as well. You can measure how effective your posts are, and if people are liking them or sharing them or commenting on them, then that's working for you, and it's something that you should absolutely try and pursue further. But with each of those posts, you have to make sure that you've got a call to action. So at the end, a link to your project page, so that they know exactly where they're supposed to go after reading it. And I think it's always a great shame if you have a really successful post and the link's not in there. So yeah, just make sure it's clear on the post. And of course, mix it up. A varied post is a good post. So use all the different mediums that are available at your disposal. And a bit more about Facebook is we generally find that on average around 40% of the pledges come from Facebook. So it's a really, really important tool to use. And I know it was so for Secret Spitfires, you did a lot of really good work through there. So if you are an organization, a business, or even for your project, create a Facebook page, because it'll be very useful for your crowdfunding campaign, but it will also be very useful in the time after which it closes. You can keep the hold of that kind of network and update with them your progress afterwards. There are many different things as well between a personal account and that of a business account. So if for a business account, you can vary the different types of posts you can do. For instance, by creating a photo carousel, you can illustrate a number of different images in your posts. And you can create events at the beginning of your crowdfunding campaign, in the middle, or at the end. And that will go out to all the people who like your page, and is a good kind of tool to do something a bit more interesting and fun for your group. I remember having the same conversation with UFM about finding your crowd, and the search bar on Facebook is a really, really good tool in which to identify all of those different groups that live on there that might be associated with your subject matter.
Yeah, there was a very, very good advice at the time, because at that time, as you know, we were getting a bit stuck. It started going stale, and we weren't really going any forward. Then when you suggested to go out and find specific groups, and I didn't realize how many of these specific groups there were on Facebook. I mean, to almost every subject, there's about 1,000 specific groups. So when you pointed us to some of them, we dug a bit deeper and found every single group interested in Spitfire airplanes and Second World War. And we started bombarding them with tiny little videos and little snippets of interviews and stuff. And all of a sudden, as you know, it started going off again.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's your project, I mean, it's so specific, and that's where all of the fans live who would be interested in a project like yours. So, yeah, my advice is to any project from Dorset crowdfunding, split apart your project into the different groups of interest associated with it, and then search for those terms on Facebook, and you can find those like-minded groups or pages or events that you can attend. And it's a good way to reach other people that are directly outside of your original crowd. And Facebook boosting, it's very cheap to do. It costs about £1 a day. So for a week of boosting, the minimum is £1. So you can spend £7 to get your actual post in front of a new audience. And what that does is you can specify by age, gender, by type of interests, or location of where you want that post to go. And you'll be able to see from the results what was successful and what people were engaging with. And on that same note, if you're boosting a post, that means you're really pushing it into fresh audiences. So anyone who likes or engages with your posts, you can scroll through them and see, do they already like my page? And if not, then you can do what we call invite to like, where you can directly invite them to like what you're doing, and they then will be privy to all of your kind of crowdfunding information, and it's a good way to grow your crowd. So I don't know, where did you do a bit of that as well then, in terms of boosts?
Well, most certainly, it most certainly did. Yeah, we did quite a lot of boosts. In fact, in total, we probably spent about £100 on it and all. But it really was important because the story, because the story is quite local. It was basically in the south of England where all these factories happened. It didn't happen anywhere else. It was only in the south of England, around Southampton area, Salisbury and Trowbridge and a few little places like that. We didn't think there was that much of a interest spreading around to the rest of the country, where in fact there would be many people interested in the subject. And where the boost really helped was because you can target so specifically on the boost, you can pick out little villages if you want to target, or towns. We also decided to hit London, and London made a big difference. So we hit London for about a week, and all of a sudden we had like 20, 30 people pledging from there. So it is very important. You're very right. There's that boost thing, even though it's slightly over exaggerated what it can do, it definitely does work if you use it cleverly and target it very specifically.
Brilliant, thanks. And yeah, likewise, do think about all the different tools available to you about kind of reaching out and growing your audience. As FM did, think about your local press. If you can build up stories on a local level, then that's when the bigger papers or news outlets are going to start taking an interest. So do build that, get those relationships going from the beginning. And certainly when you're about 50% funded, then that's an excellent time to shout about it on a wider scale and take the story to someone else. If you've got a website, make sure that you've got information about your crowdfunder, or you've installed our crowdfunding widget, which is a little mini page which sits on top of your website and allows anyone to visit it to directly make a pledge onto your project. Events, if there are events in your local area that you think will be beneficial to your network, do attend them. And likewise, don't be shy to create your own events. If you think that you're able to market it and draw in an interesting group of people, then it will certainly form nice content if you can record it for your campaign. And on a very local scale, posters and flyers will certainly help to reach those people who maybe aren't using the internet. So local shops, village halls, or homes. You can certainly use that as a more kind of boots on the ground technique. And of course, updates. There is a little tab on your actual page which enables you to connect with via email to all of those who have supported your project so far. And this is a great way to just keep them up to date with what's happening, your progress, and they can become very useful at a later date when you can really galvanize them into action to spread the word on your behalf. So there is a lot of technical information which is very useful as well. The dashboard will give you insights as to where the pledges are coming from. So here you can see Facebook, the actual crowdfunding website, where were very important, and over 50% of pledges came from Facebook. And on the top, you can see your conversion rate, which is how many people who are visiting your pledge page are going on to make a pledge. And the average is around 5%. So you want to get that number as high as possible. And that means that if you're below that, your page really isn't motivating the crowd to make a pledge. So it gives you a chance to address that situation. So the funds are available, as we mentioned in the first webinar. Do go and check these out. Have a look at Crowdfund Dorset. You can run through the criteria and see if your project is applicable. And if it is, make sure that that features in the construction of your project page. It's a very easy process to apply for the funds. You have to be live, and you just have to go to the Get Extra Funding page, and from which you can apply directly there. So do check out the criteria, and you can always get in touch if you have any questions about how to apply. But before we end the webinar, it'd be great just to have one piece of advice from you, Ethan, to our new crowdfunders as to what you think they should do in their campaign.
Well, really work out your target audience and get a really good profile of what your target audience it is you're going to ask for pledges from. Because if you don't, you won't be able to reach them. So make sure you know exactly where they are, who they are, and what they're into, so you can use all the media that they might be using in order to get to them and make your story interesting.
Great. Well, thank you, Ethan. And so, what to do next? Pick a launch date, get your email address book together, and start thinking about how you can contact all of those people you've identified on your website and your network map, and make sure that you've got that Facebook page set up and looking good. And of course, any questions in the meantime, just catch us at support@crowdfunder.co.uk. But thank you very much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to run through this webinar series with you. And a special thank you for FM for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And I think we've all learned a lot by listening to the experience that you've done. And we're very, very keen to have you on again soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, pleasure.
And next steps for everyone is go live. So best of luck with your projects. I'm very much looking forward to seeing them on the website. Many thanks and goodbye.